Operation Hope. Hope that we survive. The process by which the Union collapsed now poses a threat for Russia as well. There is no unity among its autonomous parts. Today, at a session of the Karelian Supreme Soviet, independence of that autonomous region was called for. 43 deputies, mostly Russians, demanded secession from Russia, but the voting produced a different result. The deputies called on Moscow to adopt a federation treaty soon. If this is not successful, then the question of secession will arise again. All enterprises on Karelian territory are supposed to be currently becoming Karelian property. The problem of the Volga Germans was once a bone of contention in German-Russian relations, but now land has been found to resettle the Volga Germans, and 53 million marks have been promised for this effort by the German government. 5 million Russian Germans and their families live along the Volga, but where to settle them? 133,000 hectares have been allocated for the purpose. This land was used in the recent past for storage of missile parts. To the Volga, it's 70 or 80 kilometers from here. The nearest railroad station is twice as close. At one time, before the creation of the polygon here, people lived. A well remains on the steppe. The old trees and an abandoned garden are still here. In order to create normal human life here, it would be necessary to bring water pipelines, electricity, gas, paved roads, comfortable houses into the area, and this would require significant expenditures. According to preliminary data, it would take 100 million rubles. A part of this sum will be raised by the Volga Germans themselves, and they hope to receive the remainder from the Russian and German governments. But there is one problem. The military claims that chemical or nuclear testing was never done here, but in order to become convinced of this ourselves, the local Nature Protection Committee is evaluating the situation itself, and the results will be announced by TV and radio tomorrow. For 40 years, no one has lived here, and the neighboring residents in Palaskovo and Bykov do not object to new settlement here. You're watching the news. Yesterday, an agreement was reached between the Independent Coal Miners Union and the government of the Russian Federation. Since January of this year, the minimum wage of coal workers has been increased by 3 times. In Kuzbas, shipments of ink to state printing factories have been suspended in an attempt to influence the owners of the state printing plant. Coal miners have not received any payments of salary since November because of the cash crisis. By October, Russia will have 8 million unemployed people, according to reports, and a grim prognosis by the Russian Employment Commission, caused in part by the plans of the army to decrease its ranks by 70,000 troops. This information was provided today by Russian Vice Premier Yegor Gaidar. The Moscow City Council has denied reports that fare increases will be introduced on public transportation in Moscow, and also that meat prices will increase. The Vice Premier of the Moscow City Council noted that 300 train cars of meat have been received in Moscow. And now the situation in Georgia. Our correspondent Tengiz Pashkori reports by telephone from the city of Zugdidi. Today, the epicenter of events was once again returned to the city of Zugdidi. As a group of journalists, we left by car to travel through the area. We saw expanded troops at all police stations along the road and strict automobile searches. There was military equipment along the roads. In Sukhumi, the situation is somewhat calm, but large crowds of people are gathered in the streets to appeal against the use of arms and bloodshed. The Committee for Civil Disobedience, which was formed here, was not in evidence today, nor were the representatives of the local strike committees. They have all gone into the underground. When the question was asked how they are leading and organizing the battle from the underground, the answer was, it is a secret. Today there was a strong attack on the local television transmission facilities, which resulted in the virtual suspension of television broadcasting into the area. A deputy from the Georgian Supreme Soviet who preferred not to identify himself said that a bridge was destroyed on the road to the city of Khobi from here, approximately 30 kilometers away. In the next 2 or 3 days, armed conflict between the provisional government of Georgia and the supporters of fallen President Gamsakhourdia will cease. This was the prediction of Prime Minister Sigua of Georgia. He said that in accordance with agreements that have been reached, opposition troops are beginning to leave the city of Poti and that normal life is returning there. Concerning the whereabouts of former President Gamsakhourdia, he said the former president is either in Sukhumi or in Abkhazia and may leave Georgian territory by tomorrow morning. Today in Poti, after noon, there was a meeting of the elected city assembly at which the deputies expressed their negotiating positions for negotiations with the military council. In South Ossetia, the situation is somewhat normalized. The military command of that area has declared his strict neutrality in the conflict between Georgians and Ossetians. The first round of negotiations between the two sides will take place in Skhinvali soon. The news from Nagorno-Karabakh is not so good, however. It can be declared a disaster area, the TASS correspondent reported. According to information from the Internal Affairs Administration, attacks in Khankind and Stepanakert have resulted in the destruction of 11 buildings and 1 person has been wounded. The difficulties of the economic situation in the republics, in the conditions of market prices and economic chaos, will be considered by a tripartite commission created from the Russian government, trade union representatives, and entrepreneurs. At their first meeting in Moscow today, under the chairmanship of Gennady Burbulis, they expressed their attempt to achieve these goals by the use of general and industrial tariff agreements, establishing minimum wages and minimum social guarantees. Entrepreneurial rights will also be enshrined into law. Mr. Burbulis said that commissions will be formed to work within all existing laws to resolve labor conflicts. The commission will propose tariff proposals for the coming year. For the first time, the budget for the first 3 months of this year contained accurate figures on military spending. They were down 7 times this year. The conversion fund, however, contains 10 billion rubles, which is a main condition for receiving economic assistance from the West. Here at the Kirov factory near Leningrad, many unfinished products sit around as a result of the lack of spare parts to finish construction. But the workers here at Kirov are not on strike, even though they have not received their entire salaries. Here's what they're doing instead. They are creating, on the basis of this former military production facility, which no longer gets orders from the military, facilities to reuse the burned-out fluorescent lamps, and creating these trucks to provide municipal services, which have never been produced in our country before. But the main hope is being laid on this new tractor. Production of these machines had stopped before, but now, thanks to a hard currency fund proposed by President Yeltsin for purchasing Western parts, this tractor is now being produced in in cooperation with the KAMAZ factory. So the workers here have no time for strikes. 2 weeks ago, the Moscow government resigned. We have had no information since then on who is going to take its place. We've only heard that the new government will be a reform government. Today, for the first time, the new government was presented to journalists. This, of course, does not mean that Moscow had no leadership for these 2 weeks, but it's easier to be calm when you see the new composition of the Russian capital's government and its program for action. Your program is formed, I suppose, not exclusively in order to fill up the shelves with sausage. No, but that is one of our goals. We are preparing a new program, and we believe we can carry it out because of the new powers